December the 1st, 2021, last month of the first year of 2020s, aka 2021. Hope everybody's doing good if that's possible on this Wednesday. So we got a poll tonight. Should be, is killing people with radiation murder? Because currently it's not. By the way, I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the Nuclear Proctologist.org. You can call in at 709-589-4406. All lines are open. Get your votes in tonight on the poll. Is asking, is it killing people with radiation murder? Because currently it's not. In fact, Congress lacks the authority to make it a crime, make death by radiation a crime. This is a strange story here. Protester and ex-candidate plead guilty to seeking nuclear material, but would not get prison under the deal. So he ordered in dangerous isotopes from a dark website. He was arrested, charged with serious terrorism crimes, basically. In March, his lawyers filed a series of motions to dismiss the indictment, asserting that nuclear terrorism charge under which Ryan was charged, he was charged with nuclear terrorism, but they asserted that it was unconstitutional because Congress lacked the authority to criminalize poisoning with radioactive substances. Try wrapping your mind around that. So, therefore, is killing people with radiation murder? Because currently it's not. Is killing people with radiation murder? So we got 21 votes, and 95% says yes, it should be a crime. It is murder to kill you with radiation. So therefore, if it was legally a crime, you couldn't have nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, because they're murder factories for the nuclear industry. These are disease factories and death factories. When you put them, particularly in communities or farms of all places, why would you surround nuclear power plants with farms that you're going to be feeding people? Because it's not a crime to kill you with radiation. As a future nuclear power plant in the United Kingdom, you guessed it, surrounded by farms. And in Japan, it wasn't just Fukushima prefecture where the food is radiated. It's the entire 14 prefectures, the entire northern Japan, half of Japan, 55 countries that blocked the food. Now, America just lifted all restrictions on all 14 prefectures, and the American, Canadian media, Western media didn't report on it. That should horrify you. Key facts about spent nuclear fuel. Now this was Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. And so what they had done is Sprott Physical Uranium Trust had gathered up money and bought physical uranium. And what that ended up doing was it artificially inflated the price of uranium. It was 100% Ponzi scam. And now there's an article by them published in Kitco. Key facts about spent fuel, because they bought all this uranium some investors are worried about, is what they're claiming, right? Both radiation and heat are reliably shielded by water or cement, and radiation is also shielded by steel. Both radiation and heat are reliably shielded by water or cement. In the U.S. nuclear facilities, I'm going to have to take the Geiger counter out of the site for a second. In U.S. nuclear facilities, after being used to generate electricity, spent nuclear fuel are moved to cooling ponds located on site near the reactor. Usually, a lot of it is at the top of the same building, hence Fukushima. In steel-lined cement pools of water, spent fuel rods cool and decay to levels that make them safer and easier to process or transport. Ponds at reactors may be designed to hold all the used fuel for the life of the reactor. So they store all the fuel for the entire life of the reactor. 40-year-old reactor, all the reactor cores could be stored in the pools. And Fukushima had 2 fuel pools at the top of each building because there's no repository. Ponds at reactors may be used to hold all the used fuel. The long-term solution for cast-embedded spent fuel is deep geological repositories that don't exist, by the way. And is a deep geological repository is a fancy word for a hole in the ground. The U.S. has a deep geological site earmarked in Nevada, where they spent $20 billion on litigation, by the way. And by the way, that's been ruled out. Nevada has a long time ago. So I was very curious they would say that. I was like, well, what's going on here? Why are they saying this? Spent nuclear fuel has not been a source of accidents. Of course, that's simply not true. All the spent fuel pools in Fukushima and the reactor buildings were lost, including the common spent fuel, which was on the ground, was apparently tore apart. They redacted all the pictures of that. It's a very interesting statement, though. Has not been a source of accidents. Because first off, you have MIAC, nuclear spent fuel accidents. You have all spent fuel pools, by the way, are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. There's no containment. The radiation is vented. The reason they're keeping it in the pool is because the spent nuclear fuel is still splitting the atom for millions of years. You can't contain it. Otherwise, because the gases are so volatile that a spark or oxygen being introduced, once you displace the oxygen with the emissions, because that's what happens, introducing oxygen again will cause a detonation. So they invoke Chernobyl, and MIAC is much worse than Chernobyl in Russia. They invoke 3 Mile Island. Santa Susana, United States, is 460 times worse than 3 Mile Island. And of course, Fukushima, where there's been this constant deception for many years. It's worth recalling that none of these incidences involve spent fuel or other forms of radioactive waste. So they're claiming Fukushima, well, Chernobyl was a brand new reactor. It didn't have spent fuel pool at the tops of the buildings. That's true. The best way to do that is to give you a quick... This is reactor 4. The spent fuel pools were kept there and over in that one over there. And this is the reactor at the top of the buildings. These were 190-foot buildings. So do you think the Sprott is accurate when he says that Fukushima did not involve the spent fuel or other forms of radioactive waste when the building is completely destroyed? In fact, what they done was all the medias, including the one that wrote that story, are out there pretending they're in a building that doesn't even exist because the spent fuel pools are actually gone. So Sprott Uranium Trust, by talking about spent fuel pools and how they artificially inflated the price of raw yellow cake, uranium. That's actually a crime what they're doing. It's 100% crime. It's terrifying that they would do something like that. Even in the most recent reactor meltdown in Fukushima Prefecture, Japan, spent fuel stored in the cooling pond on site never leaked radiation. So they're saying the building to the left never happened. But by the way, that's reactor 4, and that's reactor 4 with the fake being in the building. It also happened in reactor 3. You can see the fuel pools at the top of the building to the right. The depictions up there, that's fuel pools. 2 of them because you don't have any repositories. That's reactor, well, it was a mixed oxide reactor 3. It's obviously gone. And then when they use cranes in that to level that off, that's what's left of a 190-foot building. The fuel pools were at the very top of the buildings. Fukushima, yes, is worth recalling none of the actions involve spent fuel or other forms of radioactive material. Is an incredible lie. It's an absurd lie. It's a revolting, disgusting, hideous, monstrous, insidious deception. Even in the most recent reactor meltdown, they claim, following 2011, spent fuel stored in cooling ponds on site never leaked radiation, or otherwise contaminated the environment. Come on, man. How can you say something like that? How can you be that evil? First off, the plume covered the entire planet with absurd amount of radiation. It's an absurd amount of radiation we're actually talking about. So to come out and claim there was no adverse side effects is just, that's wow stuff. Or otherwise contaminated the environment. Workers, which is the homeless and destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. Spent nuclear fuel, he said, extreme radioactivity declines very quickly. The spent nuclear fuel is the fuel rods that have already gone through a chain reaction. And it doesn't dissipate quickly. In fact, if you take a pound of it, and everybody in the planet have to go up and go close to that 1 pound, that single pound will kill everybody on the planet. You can have all the animals that are left after Fukushima, which is not many, go up to the fuel rod, it'll kill all of them, everything on the planet, just by getting close to that 1 pound. You can take that 1 pound to another planet, and you can kill everybody on that planet too. You can do that for millions of years. So to claim that spent nuclear fuel, extreme radioactivity declines very quickly, in order to get investors to invest in your company to buy raw uranium, that's a crime. That's an actual crime, what we're talking about there. And then they use the World Nuclear Association, a lobbying group, as their source. The U.S. does not currently recycle spent fuel. Spent nuclear fuel, they're scumbag. However, some countries reprocess spent fuel to capture the unused uranium, plutonium, americium, by the way, neptunium. In fact, only about 4% of potential energy is captured from the uranium fuel in the first use. So it's not only that, it's very inefficient on top of that. So 4% of the uranium gets used up the only time, like it's illegal in Canada and the United States to reclaim the uranium plutonium from mixed oxide fuel, because that was dreamt up so they didn't have to store it for millions of years. They just burn it and release it into the environment. The ultimate evilness. Everything about nuclear, it can't touch anything without evil. Fossil fuel power plants emit more radioactivity than nuclear power plants. Well, this is a plume from Fukushima, a nuclear meltdown. Fossil fuel plants don't make plumes that covers the planet and pulses energy every second for millions and millions of years. Gas, oil, and coal don't make plumes that cover the planet, and gas, oil, and coal, gas, oil, and coal. I've been doing that for so many years now. It doesn't pulse energy every second. It's emissions. The only emission that does that is nuclear. Here's a plutonium model, or Neptunium, which decays, by the way, into plutonium-239. This model is TEPCO's numbers. These plumes are covering the planet, pulsing energy every second, is actually global warming. That's the definition of global warming. It's been going on for 75 years. All those nuclear tests, that was a nuclear war. It's the same radiation. It's the same bomb. It just wasn't dropped on a city. Small amounts of radiation are part of the natural world and do not present a threat to human. So here's a stock company or a company on the stock exchange trying to convince people to invest in it to buy uranium by perpetual lies. Small amounts of radiation are part of the natural world and do not present a threat to humans. Of course, there's natural stuff in the world, but this is not what they're trying. They're conflating man-made anthropogenic radiation with harmless, innocuous, and benign radiation. Sunshine generates much of the radiation in day-to-day exposures. And some building materials, including bricks in our houses and decorative rocks in the fireplace, can contain low levels of radiation. So the ultimate betrayal is when someone tries to convince you of this narrative. They're conflating natural stuff with man-made stuff. We don't have terrorism laws for sunshine. You disgusting parasite, you. Chemical reactions of fossil fuel plants release more radiation into the environment than the operation of nuclear energy plants. And they say, in fact, 10 times more. This is absurdness. You disgusting, hideous, monstrous betrayal. This is a Plume model from France of the radiation fallout. Do you notice when the plume starts, there's no plumes? There's no natural plume. It's a man-made plume. Notice the plume doesn't stop coming out. Notice the date at the top of the screen. This is a 16-day model. In 16 days, the radiation covers the entire planet in 16 days. And you conflated it with natural stuff so you can sell stocks. You disgusting, horrific monsters. You should be disbanded immediately and should actually be jailed for sedition for what you're doing. It's incredible criminal what they're actually doing with this story. Living near a nuclear plant is estimated to expose people to, now they're going to flip it into milliriems and microsieverts and unisieverts and millisieverts. In fact, they didn't even do that. They went to milliriems. These plumes that I'm showing you, this is a plutonium plume, by the way. No, this one is a xenon-133. So this plume is not milliriems or microrims or microsieverts or millisieverts or unisieverts. It's atomic decays per second. It's atoms that are floating around pulsing energy every second. They say milliriems of radiation, annual U.S. regulatory radiation limits for adults, transcontinental round-trip flights, average person's annual exposure from source, all sources they're claiming, which includes conflating man-made with natural stuff. You don't get milliriems from natural stuff. Natural stuff is natural. It's irrelevant. You're already acclimated to it through genetic superior selection. Living 1 year outside a coal plant And then living 1 year outside a nuclear plant was only 2. This is absurd, incredible, despicable, coward propaganda, what they're doing there. It's pure lies, 100% lie, the whole story, in order to trick people into buying, investing in them, so the uranium. The industry can't survive a single day on the truth. Fossil fuels release vast amounts of pollution in the form of CO2 emissions. CO2 emissions. See, that's the CO2, plants can't live without it, animals can't live without it, insects can't live without it. CO2 doesn't pulse energy every second. This is a model of 19 days emissions. There's the first one up there, the second one, the third, and then 468 hours later, 19 days later, the plume covers the entire planet and pulses energy every second. Carbon, gas, oil, and coal doesn't have these attributes. Gas, oil, and coal does not create plumes that covers the entire planet. Carbon doesn't cover the entire planet from the ocean floor to the upper troposphere. This is just a single power plant breaking down, and you covered the whole planet in brutal radioactive fallout. It's really something that anybody... New research and development for small modular reactors that don't exist is actively exploring technology that would reuse spent fuel. Right, so the fabled small modular reactors, they're claiming they can get a lot of energy out of it. But how they've done it, which is not very often you hear them talking about it, by the way, but here they're advocating a mixed oxide fuel. MOX fuel, which is illegal in Canada too, by the way, because this is a Canadian company, is actively exploring technology would reuse spent fuel. First off, there is no small modular reactors, and if you ever get one built, it'll take you 10 years to get the kinks out of it, then it takes you another 10 years to build another one to get the kinks out of it. This is about uranium and military. By Sprott, contributing to kitco.com. This article is strictly for informational purposes only. It is not a solicitation to make any exchanges in commodities, securities, or other financial instruments. But that's actually exactly what it is. You're trying to convince the investors that uranium has no adverse side effects ever, under any circumstances. Is what you've done in that. You went above and beyond absurd and evilness when you wrote that article. And you wouldn't even put your name on the article, the people that wrote it from the nuclear lobbying group. What a despicable, horrific way to make a living is what the uranium turned out to be, didn't it? What hideous, monstrous, insidious, gross, and disgusting people they turned out to be. And in their comment sections, the only comment they had was more problems with solar manufacturing and wind generators affect the upper atmosphere weather patterns, claiming that solar changes the upper atmosphere and wind. So whoever wrote that is probably the same person that from the nuclear industry lobbying that wrote the article itself. It's the definition of evil, what they've done there. And it never ends for some reasons. Green Georgia, don't fear a nuclear future. As soon as you see a headline like that, you know the lies are coming. The race to net zero carbon, and I always show you the father of net zero, the father of climate change, the father of global warming, and then the father of carbon footprint. Right, but the United Nations ran with each one of them. Now they got themselves a fourplex. I believe nuclear power to be a never-ending nightmare and supports its total dismantling and a ban as an energy source on Earth and in space. Way to go! You kick ass is what you do. Residents who returned after evacuation orders were lifted are still without clean air in Fukushima. Not very often you hear anybody mention that, is it? Besides here, of course. And up to 200,000 residents, was almost 500,000, evacuated as nuclear radiation spewed from the nuclear meltdowns into the surrounding communities, which is a completely different story than what Sprott Uranium Investment Trust tried to convince people of, and was carried by the wind and water as far away as Los Angeles and California, resulting in a global disaster. Pretty rare to have anybody mention that kind of stuff, isn't it? They got a new video game out, scumbags. And the only reason I say that is because the video game dilutes the search engines when you're looking for real nuclear news and nuclear documentation. You end up running into video game. Like the game Fallout has polluted the search engine with false trails that I follow all the time. PlayStation exclusive. PlayStation. Which is Bill Gates in it. Action arcade title Nuclear Corpse. Arcade title Nuclear Corpse launches today. And now available as digital title on PlayStation. You can check the release trailer below. Inspired by true events like Fukushima, at the Fukushima disaster, when the Fukushima disaster was all over the news. So this is a video game about Fukushima. Back in those days, after the earthquake and tsunami caused Japan's biggest nuclear disaster, you'll always hear that connotation when you hear Fukushima. Earthquake, tsunami. That's the nuclear industry's footprint when you hear that. A group of veterans volunteered to help clean up the power plant. That's not true. They only use homeless, destitute, and victims of society and immigrants who don't speak the language. My generation, the old generation, promoted nuclear plants, and if we don't take responsibility, who would? Nuclear Corpse let players control 3 characters, each with a unique set of skills. Lola is a reckless character that can reach higher places and move quickly through the scenario. Doc is the one tasked with defense duty, as his magic shield can protect his fellow mates. You can see where they're going with that one. Smarty, the witty one, will use his latest creation to stop mutant creatures from escaping the power plant. Will use his latest creation to stop mutant creatures from getting out of Fukushima, because this is based on Fukushima. And combine all of the characters' abilities to face hordes of enemies while you'll travel to the very core of the power plant where you can never go because it's a lethal dose. Indoctrinating children, that is all you can be safe around. Get some screen captures. Now that's him with his shield to protect everybody from radiation and stuff. That's the monsters escaping from the nuclear meltdown. You can see the radiation symbol to the left. These are crazies, eh? And I'd have to scrutinize all these pictures. I grabbed them all. You can see the mutant creatures. The bear's got 3 eyes. One of the creatures back there looks like an alien. The whole story is madness. He's using a gun now to kill the mutant creatures. And you notice the green eyes, because it's nuclear, right? This is apparently the reactor core, and there's a big monster at the reactor core. Got their shield. See, all those little spots, a lot of them are configured like radiation symbols. The whole story is insane. So they're targeting a very young audience, obviously, with this. You know you lost your planet when video games are Mini nuclear power plants will be one of the main topics because the World Atomic Expo started yesterday. Tomorrow's the last day. I got no documentation on it whatsoever yet. Hopefully tomorrow a bunch of us shows up. And guess where they're having it to? In France. Like, if you go all the way back to the League of Nations in 1919, you really see France's influence all the way up to today. We'll take part in Paris from November the 30th to December the 2nd, tomorrow. Compact nuclear reactors that don't exist, by the way, are an important innovation. By the way, they don't exist. And will be one of the main topics of the World Atomic Expo conference, which opens in Paris yesterday. So their main conversation is something that don't even exist yet. We decided to devote one day to small modular reactors, which actually don't exist. Bergman said that the technology will help reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Really, you think that some small modular reactors are going to reduce carbon emissions? Now, that's the game, right? Since 2015, when they met for the Paris Accord in France, was to blame everything on carbon, not on this here. This is why we got all the grief on our planet in the last 10 years for weather and for mass species die-off is the radioactive fallout. So the plume you see in there, that's another model of xenon-133 covering the planet in radiation. Carbon doesn't do that. And gas, oil, and coal don't make plumes like that with their emissions. And that plume is responsible. That never stopped, right? It's still melting down there. Bergman says the technology will help reduce carbon dioxide emissions. So they're using this fable of carbon dioxide, saying that's what the problem is, and they know it's not, in order to protect the nuclear industry. And that started immediately after Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. Nuclear energy and renewable energy sources are fully compatible. No, they're not. Nuclear has to run full tilt all the time, for starters. By the way, nuclear power plants need 2 external coal, gas, or oil plants to work. They can't run on their own power. They need 2 dedicated power plants to them. And they can even complement each other in the fight against climate change, which is caused by nuclear. That's a pretty neat trick, right? Say, no, well, we got all this climate change, but don't mention where we caused it. Nuclear is the solution. But nuclear is actually what caused it and makes it continue. And so that's the definition of evil when you promote something that means the future. There is no future if you continue to use nuclear. You have to contain all the spent fuel pools in 440 reactors immediately because they're splitting the atom into the environment. This is forever stuff we're talking about, floating around the planet. Invisible plumes are being created worldwide by 440 nuclear power plants that are similar to that every single day. Because they're still splitting the atom. And they'll do that for millions of years. Nuclear energy and renewable energy are not compatible, by the way. And nuclear energy is not able to change what's happened. Nothing can. You got to move on. So you got to develop technology that's not going to do that again. Do we find nuclear waste in our seas, oceans, and on our beaches? No, they say, because the French nuclear industry handles waste responsibly. First off, yes, they dumped it in the seas and the oceans, and it ended up in the beaches. If you just for 75 years, they've done it for 30 years, hardcore, dumping it into the oceans. I mean, in the Arctic, there's 18,000 nuclear dumps up there from the Soviet Union and Russia. So they're claiming that France nuclear industry handles the waste responsibly. It's not true. If you look at the studies, Origin and age of ongoing radioactive contamination of soil at La Hague. La Hague is in France, is a nuclear mixed oxide fuel facility, aka reprocessing plant. And they're talking about 239, 240 plutonium, 238 plutonium, 241 americium, which is going to decay into 241 plutonium, and 90 strontium. So obviously, what she said is not true. Nuclear reprocessing plants are sources of environmental contamination by gases and liquid discharges. Near-field krypton 85 measurements in stable conditions around the Riva. Estimations of atmospheric transfer is what I was wanted to talk about. Anthropogenic iodine 129 concentrations, 127 iodine ratio in rainwater in Spain, affected by airborne releases from Sellafield, which is United Kingdom mixed oxide fuel facility. That has an ongoing mixed oxide fuel meltdown, by the way, where 8 million litres a day are going into the ocean. And La Hague facility, which is France, contaminating Spain. And then 14 carbon from the atmosphere to the grass to transfer. A case study in grass fields near Riva, which is French government's La Hague fuel processing facility. So when these experts are claiming that, do we find nuclear waste in our seas, oceans, and our beaches, claiming no, because the French nuclear industry handles waste responsibly. Again, the industry can't survive a single day with sunlight shining on them. They can't have a real debate ever under any circumstances. They have no way of winning a debate. New estimations of La Hague's contribution to the artificially radioactivity of Norwegian waters and the Barents Seas. So claiming that La Hague in France doesn't pollute the planet, obviously, they forgot about all these studies. 85 krypton plumes releases from La Hague nuclear reprocessing plant. Do we find nuclear waste in our seas, oceans, on our beaches? No, said Scumbag, because the French nuclear industry handles the waste responsibly. Is simply not true, is it? It is one of the rare industries that manages waste from start to finish, she said. She's a terrorist. She meets the definition of terrorism. Berman clarified that waste generated by 58 French nuclear reactors since their commissioning fits into an area equivalent to a football field. If you put that waste, the fuel rods they're talking about, into, and they said the other 95% of the material is recyclable. You can't recycle nuclear. They don't do it anywhere only in France and United Kingdom. Everywhere else recognizes it as evilness. If you took all their fuel, for instance, you can't put their fuel together. You can't take it out of the pools. You have to keep it in containers. You can't even really do that because of the volatility of it. You can't move it once you do something like that. If you fit everything in a football field, you couldn't get within 100 miles of it because of gamma shine, neutron bursts, and X-rays. Not only that, it would definitely go into a chain reaction and you would kill every species on the planet. And sign contracts. So they're hoping over the next over tomorrow, today, yesterday, at this nuclear expo to sign contracts. So this is a sales, not an expo per se. They're trying to sell nuclear. All continents are represented. And they got 7 of them. We expect 612 exhibitors, 18,000 scumbags, and 8 from 83 countries. She added that among the conference participants will be representatives of the administration of the International Thermonuclear Reactor ITER, the construction of which was officially started in France last year. Yeah, France is going to have 5,000 particle physicists working there, scientists, looking to unravel the mysteries of quarks, right? Quantum theory and string theory is all being explored there, instead of coming up with solutions for real problems. They're trying to find out how to make bombs 1,000,000 times worse. The World Atomic Expo, the disgusting, despicable World Atomic Expo, will take place in Paris, as you know, from yesterday till tomorrow. Record global renewable bill points to the eclipse of nuclear and fossil by 2026. International Energy Agency. So this year they're expecting 290 gigawatts of renewables. You're talking about well over 300 nuclear power plants worth of renewables. Last year you had 300 nuclear power plants worth of renewables. Because of the coronavirus from the United Nations, this military-industrial complex known as United Nations, with the 195 militaries, has locked down the planet so they can have the resources for their future wars. 290 gigawatts. Last year was 261. This year was 290. Still more than last year, despite the lack of materials and the increase of cost, right? So what they're saying, by 2026, because of this trend, nuclear becomes irrelevant. For sure. In another 4 years, the world will recognize it, 5 years. Because by 2026, renewables should be putting out 600 nuclear power plants equivalent of renewable energy each year. 600 nuclear power plants in a 12-month period of renewable energy. But there's so many technologies we're not even looking at, like the geothermal, right? The pumped hydro, the compressed air technology. We are looking at it, but we're barely scratched the useful of it. Emergency sirens to be tested at a nuclear generating station. My God, how many of these stories have we covered over the years? It just seems like 1,000, doesn't it? The 70 sirens located within a 10-mile radius. If you can hear the siren, then you shouldn't be living there. It's time to sell what you got and get out of Dodge. Sell it to somebody who works in the nuclear industry. So they got 70 sirens. And sirens, great big massive sirens. Every dog within 10 square miles will be screaming its head off. And if they have an accident, there's zero possibility they're going to use the sirens. Zero. Zilch. And they're also going to bang you with cell phone alert systems. And another video game, how to prepare for nuclear fallout, surviving the aftermath. So this is a bizarre game. Gameplay in surviving the aftermath involves building a colony while withstanding a variety of catastrophes, including nuclear fallout. And many colonists will fall ill with radiation sickness or even mutate if they are left unprotected and untreated during this catastrophic event, which is what happened to our planet, right? We were left unprotected, which can last multiple days. Well, it lasts forever. Nuclear fallout are one of the most deadly environmental events that players will need to prepare for and survive in the aftermath. Depending on the difficulty level players choose, catastrophes will occur every few days, and surviving the aftermath can quickly become overwhelming to keep a colony alive with disasters like pandemics, heat waves, and nuclear fallout constantly harming colonists. And heat waves are caused by Fukushima, we're currently seeing. Players will need to have a decent stockpile of medicine, iodine pills, and food in order to make it through the catastrophe with as few casualties as possible. This is madness, isn't it? So the video game is teaching kids you need to have iodine on hand in case there's a nuclear meltdown. But again, these video games, in one context, are teaching kids that nuclear is madness, and they might put 2 and 2 together and look at Fukushima on their own eventually. But it's not. It's aimed at very young kids, unfortunately, right? It's craziness. Children get interactive with nuclear waste disposal. This is typical of United Kingdom. It's terrifying that they do stuff like this. United Kingdom is going into primary schools to convince kids, children, aged 8 to 11 years old, from 2 Colombian schools. Now, Colombia is not very far from Sellafield. They've had huge clusters of children dying of cancers and leukemias because they have a nuclear meltdown not very far away from called Sellafield. And it's surrounded by farms, and those children are also eating the food from the radioactive farms. It defies reality, don't it, what they're doing? The nuclear industry does. It's like, nah, that can't be real. When I read it, I'm always like, my God, that can't be real. These people can't really be doing stuff like this. By the way, the clusters of cancer in Colombia, in the United Kingdom, we got academic studies where they try to blame it on the flu. Anything but the nuclear power plant that's causing it. A group of 43 children from a primary school and Our Lady and St. Patrick's Primary School in Maryport took part in an interactive learning session with the University of Sheffield. The actual scumbags is University of Sheffield, and a GDF working group. James Mansfield, he's scientist and science communicator from the University of Sheffield, delivered 2 hands-on sessions to primary school students aged 10 and 11. Like, I can't even wrap my mind around why they're doing that. Because grade 10 and 11 are not going to argue with them, right, or ask questions. Students are also introduced to the science behind nuclear waste disposal and the engineering methods that would be used to construct a geological disposal facility, a hole in the ground. And they want to put it in a farming community, yeah, and keep farming. Don't stop farming. Right, that was one of the statements we heard from the Bruce Power repository they're trying to put up in English. We want the farmers to keep working. They don't have to stop. We want them to work. Because they're venting everything. It ends up in the farms, and then you poison everybody that eats the food. And the Center for Leadership Performance provides a matchmaking service between primary schools and businesses. So, why do you got a matchmaking service for primary school students and nuclear waste? Like, who the frig came up with that concept? I want to slap him in the mouth till they got no teeth left in it. James did a fantastic job explaining to the children that were picking their nose the experiments they did to explain the multi-barrier system, combination of man-made natural barriers that would isolate and contain the radioactive waste, was really effective. And the Lego GDF was a big hit. Like, that's one of the most terrifying stories imaginable, where the nuclear industry is into schools indoctrinating the children with propaganda. That should horrify everybody on the planet, that people like that actually exist. Everybody on the planet should be ashamed to be a human today. The workshop was fun, informative, and engaging, and the children loved taking part. Whoever wrote the story should be slapped around. What they're doing is evil. It's the definition of evil, doing stuff like that. Why are you targeting the children for, you despicable cowards? Statement by the Marshall Islands National Nuclear Commission on Day of Remembrance for all victims of chemical warfare, because a lot of people describe radioactive fallout as chemical warfare. There's 1 million square kilometers of the Marshall Islands the Bikini Atolls, 1,000,000 square kilometers is too radioactive to be habitable. 1,000,000 square kilometers contaminated. Castle Bravo they set off in the Marshall Islands. A single nuclear bomb was the equivalent of taking 1,000 Hiroshima 15 kiloton nuclear bombs and detonating them at the one time in the Marshall Islands. So when you look up how many nuclear bombs are on the planet, it's around 2,000 plus. See? But just a single one of some of these bombs was equal to 1,000 Hiroshima. And if you go look up the actual documentation on Hiroshima, you'll find out that wasn't a small bomb at all. November the 30th marks the Day of Remembrance for all victims of chemical warfare, as established by United Nations. Like anytime that you participate in a United Nations propaganda coup, because United Nations is huge. It's 195 militaries. George Bush Sr. described them. Oh, better off for you to hear it yourself, I suppose. What's the harm? What could possibly go wrong if I play it for you? I'll adjust the volume quickly as it starts here.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Oh my God. Holy crazy. So he called the United Nations a new world order. Not me, but him. The nuclear test that took place years ago still impact the Marshallese and others, and it will for thousands and thousands of years. So they had a big windstorm in Turkey, and they claimed that the wind was 130 kilometers an hour. It was actually it was 130 plus miles per hour with gusts much higher. And so I got some screen captures. We'll just flick through it. You see Buddy getting blown down, blown over. 130 kilometers, 80 miles per hour winds don't do that. And then you see this clock tower, it's been there a very long time, got tipped over. 80 mile per hour, 130 kilometer an hour winds don't tip over towers. So I was trying to figure out, why is all the media lying about the wind speed, I wonder? But you see roofs blowing off in Turkey, trucks tipping over. They canceled all ferry services. Vehicles were damaged, trucks traveling on the highway overturned, clock tower collapsed under the strong storm blowing at 130 km per hour in some parts of the city. They canceled all ferry services and directed several flights to other cities. Motorcyclists had difficulties, and ships, the straits between the Black Sea and I'll show you a map of that in a second. They shut down sea traffic in both directions, because that's like Istanbul is where that happened and around it. And you can see the split up there where it goes out into the other. Extreme winds in Turkey killed 6 and injured 52. 10 cities have suspended school activities, and Istanbul banned motorcycles. I've never actually heard of that before, banning motorcycles. And I've never heard of it for 130 kilometer an hour winds. All the media was calling it 130 kilometers for some reason. And one of the country's most aggressive windstorms in living memory. And I'm sure they had bigger storms than 80 mile per hour. So why was all the media calling it 130 kilometers per hour? Let's look at some of it anyway, because there's some pretty cool stuff. I remember now, I was just collecting it as I was going along trying to piece it together. I was just trying to figure it out, right? Where are we to here? So I was just grabbing these screen captures, trying to figure, you got different angles of the tower coming down. These people there's three people that are grabbing onto each other because there's so much wind. A guy tries to come out and grab him, he has to go back, there's too much wind. So you're talking 130, 150 mile per hour winds will have those kind of attributes. Look at these people, he finally reaches out and pulls them in. So that's some incredible wind we're talking about now. You see buddy getting blown way down the road. These two buses are shielding the motorbikes so they can get across the bridge. They were stuck on the bridge, the two buses lined up and made it, but they're blown, even now they're still blown all over the road. Look at them, right? Even this guy's the same thing where he's hiding behind a bus. They're not traveling very far if you watch the video, or very fast rather. You see, these roofs were obviously there since they built the building, but it got blown away. I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Why is everybody lying about the speed of the wind? See the motorcyclist getting hit by a big sheet of sheet metal and dropped? And this guy just barely got out of the way. This is pure cement that probably weighed 1,000 pounds, lands right alongside him. Wait now, I'll do it again. Here we go. Watch the cement that when it lands, how big it actually is, breaks up. He stumbles over it, there's big chunks. I can't believe he survived that. This guy here, the roof was collapsing on the inside. Wow. You can barely see him run outdoors. Same to this guy, there's a big piece of sheet metal. I think he got hit in the head, but he was... Now, all these ships, there's a lot of ships got sank, tied up at the wharf. 80 mile per hour winds, 80 miles per hour winds don't do stuff like that. And that's the same ship there, but that's different ships, right? There's a lot of different ships that are sank. This is stuff you won't see until you get up to 130, 150 mile per hour. Like big ships like that sunk right there, they don't sink in 80 mile per hour winds tied up at the wharf. So we don't know what the real numbers are because there's this collusion. They only tell you 130 kilometers an hour. Now, this is a bizarre one. So there's a mother and... Hang on. There's a mother with her two children. There's a man coming up. He's hanging onto a handrail. You can kind of see it. The two children and the mother get blown over and blown towards the car. And what does the man do? He probably works for the nuclear industry because he walks away and leaves them. Unbelievable, eh? These trailers, all the cars are getting out of the way because the trailers you're going to see coming up. And it's kind of grainy footage, I apologize. Those little buildings are starting to blow all over the place. And these people it's a very bad video, but it showed up in multiple places. Look at the guy, he dives through the window and then he comes back out. See that? I don't know if he got blown through the window because he comes right back out the same window. It's the strangest thing ever. And now he's coming out the window. These guys are physically trying to stop the building from blowing away. Holding onto the buildings. A couple of them there. These storms we're seeing, a lot of it is attributed to Fukushima nuclear meltdown. That's why I'm showing it to you. Let me get through this here. Anyway, you can't see, but the buildings are blown all over the place. Airplanes were shifted. And you can't really see it, but you can see all the projectiles blowing. They're blowing straight level, which indicates again you're at 130, 150 miles per hour winds. It's incredible stuff anyway. So I don't know why they lied, but we do know Fukushima is responsible for supercell storms we're seeing because Fukushima is heating up the planet. Look at all the debris and all the people getting blown all over the place. Let me do that again. That's not something you see, like, ever. This indicates around 150, 180 mile per hour gusts, basically. And everything gets turned into projectiles on top of that. And this one is strange. Look at this, being blown down the road and then up onto her feet. Now that particular video, let me do that again because that's really weird, right? You see this lady being blown down the road. I'll go pretty quick. And she's up on her feet. Look at that. I think what they done for that clip is they played it backwards. I can't prove that. Because I didn't keep the real video. I was like, that was weird. I grabbed screen captures of it, trying to sort it out. Is killing people with radiation murder? Because currently it's not. We got 42 votes. 95% of the people agree killing people with radiation is murder. If I kill you with bananas, is that murder? If I kill you with marshmallows, is that still murder though, right? If I kill you, if you actually die because I use marshmallows to kill you, is that murder? But radiation is not considered murder if it kills you. Because if it was, then you couldn't use it in hospitals to murder you, and you couldn't have your nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, or your nuclear dumps surrounded by farms, etc., etc., etc. There is no safe limit when it comes to radiation. See, that looks more natural. If I go backwards, let's try backwards. I'll put it on the big screen. When I go backwards, that looks more natural, yeah? That's why I say it, but for some reason the video was the other direction. So that looked natural, yeah? I don't know. It's madness if you ask me. Yeah, you know, like I put my phone number out so that people can call in, right, and fight with me. But they'd like to go into my comments section and then try to sabotage me that way. Check the phone. Oh. Alrighty. Okay. That's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. What the hell is somebody calling me this hour of the night for? It's 12 o'clock at night, for God's sakes. Hello? Oh, okay. Did you want to get live or something? Did you want to go live? We got Nigel's calling in. He's live.
Yeah, my name's Nigel, but I log in as a PBS lover.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So, I'm curious. There is a YouTube channel there, True Tooth. I think the main guy's name is Alfred Labramont Weber. He claims to be a judge of some kind, and he's
That's right.
talking with
Yeah. I'm familiar with them, yeah.
traditional elders in the BC coast.
Right.
And they're reporting Chernobyl-level radiation in certain areas in BC, and they're even reporting like Saskatoon is like red hot.
That's right, yeah. That was,
you heard?
now that's a recent report they put out, is it?
Yes, very recent. And 11 days ago was the first one, and then 1 day ago they're repeating it again.
Okay, so I didn't see that. So they're saying there's a spike happening currently.
Yeah, and what they're claiming is that the deep underground bases are being taken out but flooded, and the reactors down below are superheating the water. And, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, I would suspect Fukushima is enough to cause this, but they're saying otherwise.
They're pointing at other sources, not Fukushima, yeah. Now, I did see some of that, and I'm glad you called in because I forgot about it. I didn't understand that was going on. And so I'll watch it after the show because it's 12 o'clock midnight here.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, no, I don't know. We do know British Columbia was wiped out, the species were, because we've done research expeditions year after year on that coastline. And I didn't know there was a spike. Now, I'll cover that tomorrow night if I can find it, because that's hugely important. So I'm super glad you called in. How are you yourself? You've been around now a few years?
Yeah, I have been. I'm just about 35 kilometers west of Pickering, and
wow, congratulations!
And I remember when was it? January, the day after my birthday. Anyway, the alert went out on all the phones indicating a radiation leak.
Yeah, we covered that. That was wild, eh?
It was wild.
That was wild. They said it was an accident. They sent out alerts to several million people. Pickering was melting down or something.
But the company who made the systems said that there was no possible way of training after.
Oh, right, yeah, right, because we covered that, and there was a lot of redundancy before it would actually go to the cell phones. And they were saying that the only people that could have made it get out to the cell phones were people with the knowledge, with actual real knowledge of how that system worked. That was the only way. So there was probably an event. And like the siren, like I always say about the sirens, they're never going to use it. Somebody had pains of conscience and actually sent out the warning. But the industry nuclear industry cannot survive another accident. Right? Chernobyl was the end of the nuclear renaissance for that area of the planet. 3 Mile Island was the end of the nuclear renaissance for the Americans. And Fukushima was the end of the nuclear renaissance worldwide, right? And so there's a lot of other nuclear accidents that people are not aware of, but those that made it into the public sphere became a really turning point and a pivotal point in the history of the nuclear. Okay, was there anything else you want to throw up there? Because the show was just about to go.
I'll let you go for now. Thanks for everything you do, Dana.
Yeah, thanks for the call. Appreciate it, man. That's huge. That's great stuff.
Good.
Yeah.
Talk to you later. Thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
yeah. God bless. Yeah, that's a great call. I didn't recognize. I can't say the name I seen there, but it didn't look like it was an individual calling in. It looked more like just like, you get these random calls, salespeople or something. I apologize. And so there's a big spike in the fallout in British Columbia. That's not cool. This is a Fukushima Plume model right there, covering the entire planet with radiation. So how did we do in the poll tonight? We had 42 votes. Hi everybody. Welcome everybody. I'm gonna end the poll. 95% says killing people with radiation is murder. Killing people with radiation is murder. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Hi, Jeff. Good night, Patrick. Dana Nasana, Colette S. We had 2 donations. We had James L. James Lucid, as you know him, in the comment section. I got, just so he knows, I received it 120 Canadian. And Organic Slant donated 20, which is huge. That gets me up to, we broke even finally, because we bought the shelves and blah, 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 blah last week. Just because they were on sale. If I didn't get them, we would never be able to afford them, right? Okay, and never went into the woods today. I was burnt out today, just unbelievably burnt out. I wanted to go in the woods, but every time I went to the door, I was freezing, and I was like, this is horrific. So the radioactive plume, nobody escaped that. No species escaped Fukushima. And we got attacked by trolls in the comments section earlier. Rather than call in and have a conversation, they just went there and tried to smear the shit out of me. It's just absurd. It shows you how heartless the people in the industry actually really are. Okay, well, we'll call it a night. No, the people that prosecuted me didn't ask for mercy. From the judge for me, go on, man. Nuclear industry is a lunatic. It's a coward industry. Dob Blob, Heating Truth, James Ward, PBS lover who called in just in, Mike Mansfield, Chad, Lori, I only serve one king, Port Angeles, good night everybody, Peaceware, David, Alan, Ella, Andrew B, lots of comments tonight. Wow. Maybe that's why the trolls showed up, right? But what Sprott investment firm's done, it was outrageous. That first story we covered, Sprott Investments, uranium, physical uranium investment firm. Lady Jane Homestead, good night everybody. Thomas Dickerson, William Joseph, James Lucid was actually here tonight and donated. Thank you, James. Grand Theft Auto through Fukushima. Martin Smith. Wow, we had lots of people come through. Colette S. Hi, Colette. Mutant Botanical Garden. Hello, Mutant. Hope you're doing good. And it looks like I got everybody. And Port Angeles. Did I get everybody? I'm almost back down to the current comments. I provide documentation for my assertions. The industry doesn't. The industry feeds you propaganda from United Nations at best, but I provide you the documentation. Mr. Finnegan, 27. We're almost down to the comments. Yeah, hopefully I can get in the woods tomorrow, look for some birds and rabbits and stuff. We've been doing this now for a couple of months locally because our expeditions this year were basically sabotaged for the most part. We had a tough year, right? It's been a really tough year. Shayla White. Hi, Shayla. 801. Hugs and love, honey. You too. Yeah, looks like I got everybody. If I missed anybody, my apologies. I will read comments after anyway. Alrighty. It was a tough show tonight. So much nuances there. Sometimes it's better just to tell the story instead of overloading everybody's senses, right? It's 12:15 my time. I won't sleep until 3 or 4 o'clock. And Don Vincent Walters, I need glasses here, man, when I'm doing this. I apologize if I butcher anybody's name. And Andrew B is CFINSTR, is actually Andrew B's old channel. Wouldn't work for some reason. He had to create that one. Okay, good night, everybody. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Tomorrow night's the last show of the week, theoretically. Unless something happens like last week, where they claimed the ice wall was melting. Yeah, hugs for everybody. God bless you too, Shayla White. And everybody, have a great night. See everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.